Welcome to Game Retail Ramblings, episode number 27. I'm your host, Travis Severance, coming to you live from Millennium Game Studios in spooky season, Rochester, New York. Somehow we moved to spooky season. That's like a new thing. I haven't heard it over the last couple of years. So spooky season is upon us. I got some spooky stuff behind us. Thanks to everybody that tuned in for our first episode of Behind the Counter. It's always sort of scary going into a new endeavor and trying something out for the first time. So it was nice that I had my good friend Paul with me there for that. We'll have episode 2 will be next week, and we're going to get Darcy Leach from Mind Sculpt Games. So if you're not familiar with her, feel free to stop in and check her out next week, probably this time as well, or maybe she'll go Tuesday, I'm not sure. Today we are going to be talking about customer types, and what I mean by that is there was a conversation that came up about a week or so, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point. There was a retailer that wrote an article on his idea or his views of what customer types were, and there was a whole pile of people that sort of jumped in, and it felt like his approach was dated, or he was really being like old and grognardy about who the customers were, and that's not who my customer is, and like people were sort of quacking back and forth at each other about different things. So I wanted to kind of talk about customer types today. There was a time before, I want to say 8 years ago or 9 years ago, when I had done a seminar where I did customer types, and I think I used maybe the Zodiac to do that. It's easier to do it in a more simplified way. I think you can get lost in the subtype of who customers are and what customers are. So today I'm just going to sort of break it down into just the 3 primary groups that we're sort of building the store around. And those 3 groups are simply gamers, families, and collectors. So how do we engage with them? What do we do in the store to make it so that it's a fun, shoppable experience for them? How do we make it so that they want to come into the store and try things out or buy things, or be able to feel like they're part of a community, or for us to be able to have inventory that they actually want and they need? I feel like those are 3 large groups that we are situated in a way where, with this industry, with gaming and things like that, we can approach them directly and be able to have good conversations with them. We can bring them into the store and give them something that they can experience that's a little bit different than what they would normally do. I'm going to get right into it and say that we merchandise our store in a way that's as effective as it can possibly be. And we try to make it so that when you walk through the doors of the store, you can look around the store and be able to find the area or the category that you're looking to go into. It's not set up, like Home Depot, where they've got those giant signs that say plumbing and bath and that sort of stuff. But we do have signs that say board games and miniature games and role-playing games and things like that. When you look at coming through our doors, looking around, there's employees right in front of you that are greeting you when you come in. They can sort of guide you through whatever the shopping experience that you want is. So when we talk about the first group, which is gamers, it's basically our core competency. Like, the name of our store is Millennium Games. We sell games. Now, we have times when people ask us if we sell video games, and they ask us if we have different kinds of games. But at the end of the day, primarily they know we are a game store. There was a competitor of mine, they're no longer around, but they used to have a sandwich board out in front of their store that said, "No, we don't sell video games." Well, I'd never do that, because if somebody's going to walk into my store for any reason and look for games and gaming, I want to be able to show them that I have other games. I don't necessarily have digital games, so I don't anti-advertise for myself in general. So we have a store that's set up in a way where we have events that are built around games. We have all sorts of tournaments and different leagues and things like that are set up for gamers to be able to engage in. They come in, we do our best to try to build communities based around the types of games that they play. So we tend to stick to the 4 quadrants, which is board games, card games, role-playing games, and miniature games. We try to make sure that our event calendar and our learn to play and our how to play and stuff like that all fit into those sort of groups. They're the biggest groups of customers that we have. As far as that goes, we have loyalty programs that are built specifically to engage with them. And a lot of times our inventory and our staff expertise sort of speaks to them as well. We have people that are intimately familiar with manga and Gundam, and the same thing about 40K, and the same thing about the latest Commander decks or Lorcana, or the hottest board game that just came out of the Essen Fair last week. When we started at the old location, I would say that product selection, sort of the way that we were located and what we sort of build our business around, it was very apparent when I started off as just a part-timer that we were a store built for gamers. It wasn't really a store built for any sort of other kind of category. Occasionally we had some collectors that popped in, because we do a decent amount of singles business, but in general, it was not, the old store wasn't built specifically for families and stuff. So it was the sort of thing where I needed to sort of grow into that and make some product adjustments and bring in some different product lines and stuff that sort of focused maybe a little bit more on the mainstream and sort of focused more on how do I end up growing that other part of the pie. So inside the category of gamers, there's a whole bunch of subtypes. I talked about some of them. You've got what a board game customer needs from a game store is going to be different than what a role-playing customer needs from a game store, which is going to be different than what a card game player needs for a game store, and a miniatures player as well. A lot of times when I look at stores, depending on your size, it's probably more beneficial for you to, instead of trying to lead into all four of those, maybe just focus on two based on the size that you have. Because I think to effectively carry miniatures, you really have to focus on the miniatures category itself. And it's not just miniatures, it's miniatures and miniature lines. It's an entire line of accessories that go along with them. It's potentially terrain and bags that you can carry those things in. It's paint lines. It's bigger tables or different tables that they need. It's game mats. It's a lot of stuff that can be detrimental to your retail space in terms of bulkiness and size if you don't have something that's able to accommodate and sort of capture all the sales for those things. The other side of that too is board games. Board games is massively space intense, right? The amount of space that we have dedicated to board games is like 5x everything else in the store. Well, part of that is just due to the shape and the size and the variance as far as the boxes go and that sort of thing. We sell everything from little tiny, Love Letter, which is 9 cards in a bag, up to massive Hero Quest and Nemesis and a whole bunch of these big bulky, Frosthaven, Gloomhaven type games. So those are going to take up a ton of shelf space as well. So what the board game customer is going to need, not only just a selection of games that you can onboard them with to get them involved in that part of the hobby, but you also need to be able to show them that you have classics that they might want to buy for friends, and that this time of year is specifically important because you're going to have a lot of people that are coming in to get themselves kind of introduced to what board games are. And you also have to have front list stuff. The bulk of our catalog in the industry now is based around new releases, expansion products, that sort of thing. So when a board game customer comes in, whether they're local or whether they're somebody from out of town, they want to see that your finger's on the pulse, that you have the newest stuff that just came out recently. They want to see that you've got the new Lord of the Rings Duel from Asmodeus on your shelf, because if you don't, you're going to look silly, because a lot of copies of that game are going to sell just based on its pedigree between the license and the actual Seven Wonders Duel game itself. Each of those customer types sort of have their own needs. Each of them have their own space requirements. Each of them have their own opportunities or lack of opportunities as far as events go. I know there's a lot of stores out there that sort of struggle with board game events and things. We have a couple of different ways that we do it that work for us that won't necessarily work for everybody. Card game players, same sort of thing, right? They're going to want sleeves, they're going to want tournaments, they're going to want boxes available, they're going to want market price stuff, they're going to want singles. Are you carrying a card game, and are you able to carry singles? Can you meet all the needs of that customer and capture all those sales? Do you have something on your calendar on a weekly basis that has that group getting together so that they can think of it as sort of a third space and build that community out? And the same thing with role-playing customers, right? You can have a whole bunch of different books and things, but what are you doing inside of your store to sort of show them that you have a level of expertise and that you're actually engaged with that customer base at any level? I mean, Free RPG Day is something that we host once a year, but aside from that, what are you doing on a weekly or even a monthly basis to show them, hey, come on in, check these things out. We're happy to teach you how to play these things. We're going to give you a little bit of a taste of what we do here. Maybe it's not for everybody. At least they have an opportunity to sort of try that out. So I think that in a nutshell is sort of our core customer in terms of gamers. Now we have core customers that we have product lines for that I didn't mention in there. We've got an entire section of disc golf. So we have a bunch of disc golf players that come in here as well. The store wasn't built specifically around disc golf. Disc golf is sort of an adjunct thing that we sell along with, Lego and Gundam and that sort of stuff. But we try our best to make it so that the products that we sell are adjacent enough to each other that it doesn't look like, we're not in here when we're selling oil changes and press-on nails or anything like that. Not to say that we wouldn't do fake nails if they had a D&D logo or something like that. We certainly would give it a try. Group 2 is going to be families. So my brief description of families is parents, kids, or family groups that are looking for shared activities. Families are friend groups too. We see a massive amount of friend groups that come in. Our board game night last Friday, I think, had 95 people here. It was a whole chunk of people that are just for friends coming in to learn. We had Tower Up last week, and then the week before that we had something else that we had 85 people that were coming in on a Friday night too. So Friday Night Magic has sort of been replaced with Friday Night Board Games for us. Not to say that we don't host Friday Night Magic, we still do that, but we certainly have more bodies in the store now to play board games because, I don't know, I think people, couples, friend groups are looking for a place to come that really, not that if we didn't sell beer, we wouldn't sell beer to them, but I think they're looking for an environment that maybe isn't alcohol focused, that sort of thing, and they're looking to play games. So they sort of look at it the same way as they would like a bowling alley or something like that as far as their recreation goes. So our numbers have continued to increase. We have fantastic people that are running those games and are showing those games for people, and no shortage of great product to be able to sell them as well. Store setup for family setup is a little bit different. A lot of the stuff that we think about is our exterior, interior, our bathrooms, that sort of thing. What a family will endure, and I'm going to use that in quotes, as far as what your retail experience is going to look very different than what a gamer will endure, for better or worse. They're going to need you to have clean bathrooms. They're going to need you to have good lighting. They're going to need you to have space to be able to move around, and you have to have aisles that are built in a way where you can fit a stroller up and down them and that sort of thing. And the product mix is going to be a little bit different. Our core distributors sell plenty of party games, which is the place that a lot of people go when they think about how am I going to address what family needs are. And you can find a whole ton of party games, but the family game is sort of a little bit more elusive. So it becomes this kind of hodgepodge of children's games and activity games and stuff that's like party game, but not adult party game. So it's like this kind of an elusive thing where if you're just sort of stocking board games or you're just stocking board games and maybe Lorcana, like what do you do? Now there's some good role-playing games out there that are sort of built around families as well. I mean, Renegade had Wardlings for a little while. They have Kids on Bikes. No Thank You Evil is another one that's sort of, my first role-playing experience for kids. Adventure Maximus is another one. There's the My Little Pony the My Little Pony game is built for both, bronies or families that want to play. So there's opportunities there, but we end up leaning into books. As an example, we have a lot more toys in this location. Having an account with Hasbro Direct, also Spin Master, both of those product lines I supplement with ACD. ACD deals with a good amount of toys, so they're really good about having stuff that maybe those publishers typically don't have, or they don't order quite as much of. So I order my supplemental stuff from ACD, and they do a really good job because that's just part of what I'm doing on a regular basis. There's Rubik's Cubes, and we've got kites, and we've got puzzles certainly fall into family games, but we do lean into a lot of books and a lot of kids books, and there's a ton of kids books that are sort of nerd adjacent stuff. Like above my shoulder over there on the left hand side is it's just a Pokemon collector's book, right? We sell a dozen of those a month or so. Like it gets pretty crazy, and I mean to the point where if you're a smaller store and you're looking about how do I draw some more people in as far as families and stuff like that, I think an easy place to go to is just a small section of books because they don't take up a ton of room. They're pretty easy to stock. It's not something that you have to think all that hard about. Like it wasn't difficult for me to just decide, okay, we're going to bring in, the 12 Days of Christmas with Bluey, right? We're going to sell 6 to 12 of those books in the next 30 days, and I'm not going to have to think about it again until September next year. Lighting is a big thing, advertisement, how clean is your store? What sort of music, if you have any music playing? We're not a music store, but there's a lot of stores out there that are music stores. Are your staff members built in a way where they can have a conversation with a person that's a parent that's not necessarily indoctrinated with our vocabulary and be able to explain to them what a social deduction game is or why it's important to play deck builders, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of facilitation you have to do as far as setups go. Your product array is really important, and so is the expertise that you have as far as employees being able to manage that kind of stuff. Because if you've got language issues in your store and somebody's swearing and there's screaming going on and there's that sort of thing, like you're not going to find families in a place that, unless they're gamers, that are going to come in and deal with that on the regular. So you have to really sort of align your store in a way where families can come in, they can feel comfortable, they don't feel overwhelmed. We sort of built the entire left-hand side of the store specifically with families in mind. We've got books and we've got Gundam over on that side, but there's a lot more toys. Lego was a big part of us sort of trying to reach out to more families and saying, hey, this is a big brand that you know and that you love. And it's one of those things too where when I talk about adjacency of product, Lego is one of those things. A lot of people know Lego. There's a lot of our regular core customers that shop Lego and they buy all the Star Wars stuff or the Mario stuff or whatever it is that happens to be in their particular fandom. But it's also something that when families come in, it sort of disarms them a little bit in that, oh, they have Lego. This is a legitimate place that I'm buying retail goods from. That's not to say that you can't do that with other brands without having to open an account with Lego, because they are kind of a pain to deal with initially. You can do that certainly with Nano Blocks or a couple of the different Melissa and Doug things, and you can, get a nice display of Haba stuff, although I would say that Haba as a brand in general, while it's massive in Germany, hasn't really broken through in the US market all that much. Animal Upon Animal sells really well for us, but it doesn't have the same level of push that something as recognizable as Lego does. Now, maybe that's unfair to Haba, but it's certainly an opportunity for you to be able to show them something that Haba does that's a board game that maybe has a European origin to it, and just explain to them this is the sort of stuff that they are doing in Europe when we were sort of messing around with Atari and Nintendo and just playing a bunch of games with Pop-O-Matic bubbles to get around a board with a player and that kind of thing. So it's a nice sort of way to on-ramp them a little bit. Plush as well is another thing that we carry that's certainly family centric as well. So that was category 2. Category 1, gamers, of course, bread and butter. Core competencies. If I'm a game store that's not set up to be able to meet gamers' needs, I have a problem there. Families is sort of the next rung of hoped for customers, because it's sort of one of those things where you widen your net exponentially if you have families that are talking about your stuff and they sort of let people know where your store is located, and their word of mouth is fantastic. So, and then the third category that we deal with, and this one's smaller in terms, I don't even know if I would call it smaller actually, because if I'm going to lump everybody that buys singles in as a collector, which in broad speaking, I guess they sort of straddle gamer and collector as well. So collectors are customers who are interested in rare, limited edition, or collectible items like cards, miniatures, special edition board games. It feels like a large chunk of the larger publishers now are coming out with a role-playing book, and there's always a limited edition or a collector's edition book and so on and so forth that they're coming out with that only has this very specific cover for a certain period of time, and they'll charge you more for that particular cover, or they'll charge you the same. Part of the reason they can do that is because it doesn't cost them any more to print those hardcover books with that thing on there. Not to take anything away from how cool those limited edition covers are, but we order less of those and less of those and less of those, because as every game has a special edition is no longer a special edition at that point. So if you're putting out a special edition for every single book you have, aside from the customer chasing having every single special edition one, which reduces every single book that comes out, going back to that well time and time again, I'm not sure if it pays off. Now, I'm positive that WotC or Paizo or Goodman Games can jump in here and comment on the reason why I'm wrong. Modifius does it on occasion too. There are a handful of people that do it as part of their Kickstarter, which I completely understand that. Okay, cool, it's a limited buy-in thing. Let's go from there. But for general release and that sort of stuff, if it lasts longer than a month, it probably wasn't a limited edition. We do a lot of used. When I talk about used, I talk about not just singles, which people tend to not, they may or may not think of as used, but singles are typically used. Somebody actually opened up from a pack to sell them to you. So we deal with a giant amount of singles. We have a massive singles business. It's probably 30% of what we do overall for revenue here, if I add Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Magic all together, along with the supplemental games that we sell singles for. But we also have an enormous used board game section, and we have occasion to buy some really high value, rare ticket stuff. So our section of used board games is something that any board gamer that's been around for a little while, they make sure that they spend some time looking through that stuff, because occasionally there's a piece of treasure there. Now we sell a lot of our good high-end stuff. We go through and we check for pieces and things like that, and we'll end up selling those online. We typically give the local customers 1 to 3 weeks to take a look at it, or sometimes we have somebody specifically that we know is looking for something that ends up coming through the door that we have. It's not a customer order thing, but it's more of a service that we give to core customers that come in and say, hey, if a copy of Horus Heresy, the board game, ever comes through, please let me know. Give me a call if that happens. So we'll call them up, and we'll do that as sort of an additional customer service thing. We also buy used role-playing games, and role-playing games have a massive swing between what the value of them are. We had a whole pile of, we had essentially bought a collection of everything that Paizo had printed for Pathfinder for first edition. It was it was, I don't know, 300 books or something insane. And some of them had some really, really high price ceilings on them, and we sold those out. We have a high-end role-playing rack. We have an area that's more expensive board games, that sort of thing. So collectors definitely come in and take a look at our store. with regularity in each of those different categories. We also sell some used miniatures, though it doesn't typically fall into the category of collectible or limited. Now, there are times when, Games Workshop doesn't have a model for something, or they're going to replace a model for something, so it feels like it's collector's edition, even though it's just they haven't come out with the new mold or the new sculpt or whatever the case may be. But in general, collectible miniatures outside of the blind box stuff that maybe WizKids deals with Dungeons & Dragons, or HeroClix, which are two things that we don't have a lot of singles for. We have a small display, and I think I talked about it either last episode or the episode before, where we did open some of the 50th anniversary stuff just to kind of look at those things and put some of those out. We've got a small section of Lego minifigures that we sell that are individual as well, too. These aren't massive. They're not huge sections for us. They don't generate a ton of revenue. They're kind of cool because they're nice displays. Occasionally somebody that does collect minifigures will come in and go, oh my gosh, you got the astronaut. I haven't been able to open that one. So they come in and they buy the astronaut from us, or we opened the Disney Stitch version. So Stitch sold and he was super popular. So that worked out okay. But I mean, in general, we don't have anything that's specifically set up as far as collectors to come in and do. We don't do like flea markets, and we don't do board game auctions or anything like that. I know there's a group of people out there that do that from time to time in their stores with, I'm sure, varying degrees of success. It's just a lot for us to sort of shut down our entire play space, to let a bunch of people come in, to figure out how to monetize that, to have a Barker up there, to deal with, silent auction style or this or manage that. We just have everybody lug their stuff in and put things and deal with store credit. And there's a lot to do to make that thing work. And with the number of people that we have coming in consistently for our weekend events, it's really hard to deny that and sort of insert something like that in. And going offsite just means that I'm increasing my cost to be able to do that. So that's not something that we're sort of interested in either. Although we have things like, we have Pokemon Trade Day. That's sort of as close as you can possibly get. Most of that is just sort of an onboarding way for us to be able to get the number of parents that come into that day. If I were to take a survey of every single one that know how to play the game, is like less than 1%. And the number of kids that know how to play the game is right around that too. My bathroom's getting redone tomorrow, and a gentleman came in that did the design for it, and he was sort of asking me what I do, and we were going through conversations about that. And he's from, south of here. And I was explaining to him sort of what the store is and that sort of thing. And he's like, oh, my kid has Pokemon too. He's like, I never spent the time to learn that game. I said, well, funny enough, we have a lot of that. I said, there's a really nice product called the Battle Academy that they do, which is one of the nicest starter products on the planet. I said, if you bought one of those, it's $20 or $25. You get 3 little starter decks in there. It will walk you through how to play that game, and you'll know how to play the game. It'll take you maybe 20 minutes or a half hour. It's not all that hard of a game to play. I think a lot of times most of the kids are like, they just play war, and then based on what the highest, like Snorlax has got to be the big winner there because he's got insane HP, so that they're not actually playing the game. So we give them opportunities to come in and sort of bridge that gap and say, this is actually how you play if you want to play. And a lot of times what ends up happening is the parents that come in with their kids to play that know how to play end up teaming up with the other parents and teaching them how to play too. So relationships sort of start from that, and it helps grow the community. That's one of those things where we're sort of bridging all 3 tiers there. We've got gamers that we're dealing with their Pokemon Trade Day. We've got collectors that are coming in because there are some adults that come in to trade specifically for the trade day as well. We've got bundles that are opportunities for the families that come in to be able to buy the game at a little bit cheaper place. And then we're also doing some education. So we're sort of touching all the bases when we do that sort of an event. So we do them once a month or every other month, give or take. Gundam Build Day is sort of the same thing. It's us introducing a whole bunch of people to what Gundam is. There's a collector's market for Gundam too, but it's typically the older stuff, not the stuff that we have on the shelf. But it brings in those gamers that are gamer customers that maybe have never built a Gundam. Maybe they feel a little bit intimidated by that. It brings in families because a lot of times I've got a parent and a child that are sitting there, they're building as well. So it gives them an opportunity to come and sort of play in the space a little bit. So we end up fostering their desire to want to do that. So, when we're looking at customer types, there's a lot of different ways you can go. There's a famous, Timmy, Johnny, and Spike article where Mark Rosewater sort of broke down who he thinks Magic players are. And there's been a bunch of different variants of that. There was a variant of that for Game of Thrones players as well. And I think it's something that's used in other communities too, that talks about if a person's an aggro player, if they like combo, or if they just like the big giant creatures, that sort of thing. And I think you get yourself lost in that. And one of the things that was sort of lost in that conversation that I was referencing in the beginning was somebody had put forth that this is who their customer is. And then a whole bunch of people sort of piled on and said, no, that's outdated and it's this and it's that. And I didn't comment. I'm just reading the stuff that's happening. And well, there's your own personal bias that you have for the people that you interact with in the store. Nobody's got any data, right? Like, nobody in the industry can say, well, the typical customer is this age and they're this bracket and they're this political affiliation and they're so on and so forth. It's conjecture. It's just a whole bunch of people saying this is what this is. Like, I'd much rather identify these are sort of the three groups that I think broadly are people that I could potentially attract to my store if I build it in a way where they actually want to shop and they want to support me, and I put products on the shelf that they'd want to buy at fair prices, and I host events that speak to sort of what they want to try out or give them first-time experiences. You know, a lot of times what we have is we have people that we invite in as families to these events to sort of experience what we're selling. They end up getting converted into gamers, so they're spending more of their money in the gaming industry. And then there comes a period of time where they sort of cross this threshold where I was sort of the primary place that was getting the majority of their purchases. And some of that starts to fade away because they're spending more and more and more. So part of what you do as a person, myself included, is if I'm spending more on something, I try to find different ways so that I can minimize what my spend is without having to minimize my enjoyment and my entertainment. So we build a whole ton of customers all the time, and then inevitably we'll lose them to, you know, websites or Amazon or places that are going to sell things a little bit cheaper than what we do, broadly speaking. And I don't have any kind of illusions that those core gamer customers are spending every dollar in gaming with me. In fact, I'd be surprised. I appreciate the fact that they come in and I have something that they would want to buy from me and that they want to engage in that level, but it's not my expectation. My expectation is that we open the doors, we have a nice shopping experience. I've got staff that has expertise and intelligence that can guide you in a direction to help you find the product that's going to meet your needs. We're going to do it in a space that you're not embarrassed to bring your mom into. We're going to have some events that you're going to be able to learn some new stuff with. And in general, when you cross the threshold of that door and into our world here, you get to forget about all the other crap that you're thinking about out there, you know? So it's escape. What I'm trying to sell is entertainment. Come on in. Forget about the crap that's going on outside of the world, in the outside world, and just give yourself a chance to breathe here and to be able to play with a bunch of people that maybe you don't align with in all these different areas, but you can have fun together. And that's sort of the basis of what we're trying to do here. So identifying the customer types that you want to bring into that and how you can facilitate your store best to be able to do that is going to be a primary way where we continue to stay in business and help us grow. So thanks for everybody for stopping by. Again, if you haven't subscribed or liked or want to give me some feedback, feel free to jump down in those comments. I think I'm like 60 away from 1,000 followers, which would be good. Next week again is Behind the Counter 2. So Game Retail Ramblings will take a break. We'll do Behind the Counter 2. It's going to be Darcy Leach from Mindsculpt Games. I'm excited to talk with her. She does some fantastic stuff in the retail world, so it'll be nice to hopefully bring a new audience to her space as well and check out her store a little bit. Aside from that, we'll do the 30-minute AMA, which we do afterwards every single week. And happy gaming to everybody. Thanks for stopping by.